Hello, this is Alexia again. Today we're going to be exploring how best to teach the distributive property to find the product of a whole number and mixed number. It's really important students understand the distributive property, but they don't have to use this property to solve multiplying a whole number by a mixed number. The distributive property is a preparation for students when they have variables instead of numbers inside the parentheses. So the distributive property um, kind of consists of that formula that we've seen where it's A times B plus C, and where that equals to AB plus AC. So we're going to be exploring that a little bit more today. We're going to take a look at the next page here. So when teaching students how they can use the distributive property to multiply a whole number and a mixed number, it might be helpful to review the distributive property and how to solve whole number times a whole number. So here we have the example 3 times 125. And when we studied this in an earlier unit, we saw that we can kind of expand that second factor, 125, into 100 plus 20 plus 5, and multiply each of those numbers by 3. And reminding students of the array that we also use to find out the product of 3 times 125. So these are some things that you might want to review with your students prior to tackling whole number times mixed number. Also, giving them a real life situation might also be useful to help them understand how the distributive property works. Let's take a look at this slide a little bit more. It says here 3 friends were going to a local fast food restaurant. They each wanted 2 burgers and 1 french fry. How much items did they order? So you would ask students, well, how would you solve this? Wouldn't you multiply the 3 people by the 2 burgers and then multiply the 3 people by the 1 french fry? So they would kind of be doing 3 people, and then here in the parentheses we have the 2 burgers plus the 1 fry, which is what they each ordered. And there we could figure out, okay, 3 times the 2 would give us that 6 burgers, and the 3 times the 1 french fry would give us the 3 french fries in total that were ordered for those 3 friends. And then we get 9 items that were ordered. So it might be helpful for students to see a real world situation where they can kind of tie in how the distributive property works. All right, let's go ahead to slide H. So on slide H, students have to show 2 ways. They can use the fraction tools here on the bottom, but we also want them to tie in what they just saw in the previous slides from this lesson. And it might be a good idea to use a collaborative board through Nearpod, which we explored in a previous video. So for this problem, it might be a good idea as students are submitting their work to use the CRA sequence so that they get a tangible understanding of the math and see how it kind of all links together. So you might want to find first a student who is given more of a concrete example of how to solve this. So that could look like them using the fraction strips. So there are digital tools here located at the fraction tools that they might have used, and they might have shown their answer using fraction strips. So they come up with the answer 6 2/5 by making 2 groups of 3 1/5. You might then have a student who used more of a representational way, which is semi-concrete, and it's usually a drawing of a model. So here we have, maybe their thinking was, okay, I'll make this bar model with 3 1/5 2 times, or a tape diagram. And then they kind of rearranged it by drawing lines here to split apart the whole number and fraction. And then maybe they put together the whole numbers and put together the fractions to come up with that 6 2/5. Maybe students used an array to solve it. And they did, they split up 3 1/5 into 3 1/5, and then multiplied 2 times 3 to get 6, and 2 times 1/5 to get 2/5, and still get that answer of 6 2/5. Then for more abstract, which is using only numbers and symbols, you might have seen students kind of refer to maybe an earlier example in one of the previous slides for this lesson where students saw repeated addition being used. And again, similar to this tape diagram here, they originally write it 3 and 1/5, and then maybe they group together the whole numbers and group together the fractions to get, again, that mixed number of 6 and 2/5. And lastly, you might see some students use the distributive property, and where they multiply the 2 and the whole number, and then the 2 and the 1/5, and kind of break it down like this. So these are different examples that you might get. And again, you may want to use that CRA sequence, so giving students more of a concrete example, then a more representational form, and then more abstract. And it's good to see all of these ways. A lot of students just learn the process or formula of the distributive property and never truly understand how or why it works. So even students who can think about it more abstractly can benefit from seeing it with a concrete example or a representational example like this, because then they actually see how that kind of all links together. So slide I shows these two examples here. It shows way number 1, which is more of a representational example, and then a more concrete example where they're using the distributive property. Again, you'd like to go through the CRA sequence. So if your students don't use a representational model, this would be a go-to slide. You really also want students to link the two examples here. So if they didn't give you, for example, this idea here, this slide is really a great way to kind of show them that way of solving it as well. And again, you'll want them to make that connection. How are these problems solved differently, but how do they both achieve that same answer? Well, we've come to the end of this video segment. I hope you found this video on how to teach the distributive property when multiplying a whole number and mixed number useful. I'll see you next time.